This punishes law-abiding Canadians. It's not going to do anything to go after real criminals and deter gang violence. It does nothing to focus on the illegal guns and smuggling, bringing guns in from out of the country. Some federal politicians were not truthful when they said that they'd never go after farmers, hunters, and target shooters.
Hey everyone, I'm Franco Terrazzano, the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation here in Ottawa. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Mr. Robin Spear. He's holding down the fort there in the prairies. Robin, I'm over here looking at what's going on in Ottawa with this gun ban and buyback program. We also see that there's a handgun freeze, but it looks like the feds are now going to be banning even more guns. What's going on?
Yeah, it's incredible, Franco. The feds have just decided arbitrarily and last minute to ban thousands of long guns, which will criminalize probably well over 1 million Canadians. So the feds have decided that old bird gun of your grandfather's that he's been using to hunt and on farm for decades in the country, that is now going to be defined as a weapon of war designed for the battlefield, as certain MPs keep saying in Ottawa. And the government is going to prohibit that old gun and ban hundreds of thousands, if not probably well over 1 million legally obtained firearms from law-abiding Canadians. They're banning hunting firearms that have been used safely and responsibly for decades, that legally obtained property used safely on farm and in the country. So you're right, Franco. Ottawa is really sowing confusion with all of these different types of firearms rules. They seem to keep making up on the fly. This ever-expanding ban and buyback scheme, it's an expensive policy. It's going after law-abiding Canadians. It's going to do nothing to target gangs and violent criminals using guns that are already illegal in Canada.
All right, so let's unpack this a little bit more for our listeners, because we've been hammering this Trudeau gun ban and buyback for a long time. You know, it's expensive, it's ineffective, it's going to be a taxpayer boondoggle. But what's new here? Like, what is the news that our supporters need to know about?
Yeah, that's a good point. And nobody really seems to know right now. That's what's so bizarre about this, including the government members who are making these amendments. So this new firearms ban that we keep hearing about recently, it's an amendment brought forward from a government member of parliament from Toronto. He brought this amendment to the House of Commons Public Safety Committee just recently in mid-November. It's hundreds of pages long. It lists thousands of firearms that they now want to ban. So it's bizarre. You know, here we have a government member of parliament amending the government bill after witnesses and testimony have already occurred at Public Safety Committee. Further, like you said in your question, Franco, this bill that's being amended is Bill C-21, which many of our listeners will know as the handgun freeze bill. That's different than the buyback program that the feds announced back in 2020. That government ban and buyback scheme from 2020, they listed more than 1,500 models that they deemed scary looking, aesthetically or cosmetically, calling them military assault style firearms. That was the one where this past summer, they came up with a price list for compensating owners of these firearms. And there's still a lot of uncertainty on that program, but we know it's going to cost taxpayers somewhere in the hundreds of millions, conservatively, to probably well over $1 billion. And we know that from the parliamentary budget officer who did an estimate on that program. So what's new now? What we're talking about today is this last minute amendment to the handgun freeze bill that is going to prohibit most likely well over 1 million rifles and shotguns. And those are used for hunting, used on farm. Currently, they're either defined as non-restricted or restricted firearms. This amendment is going to make them prohibited, which means they can't be used. And, just one key point for some people unfamiliar with guns. This is not the stuff you see on TV like machine guns or automatic weapons in the movies. Those don't exist in Canada. They've been banned in Canada and haven't been in use here for more than half a century. But what it does mean is that hunters, farmers, sport shooters, they're not going to be able to use those same guns they've been safely using for generations. And either they're going to have them locked up permanently, or perhaps the government is going to move to confiscate them. So if those guns in this new amendment do become part of this buyback scheme, it's going to cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars more, if not billions, almost certainly billions. So this is just, it's another giant federal boondoggle waiting to happen while doing absolutely nothing to reduce illegal gang activity and violent crime in Canada.
Even if you're not a gun owner, it really matters to you just as a taxpayer, if for not other reasons. And you referenced the parliamentary budget officer. I mean, they put out a big report a little while ago. I remember going over it, and they say the cost just to reimburse gun owners could be up to $756 million. Now, the key word is that is just to reimburse the gun owners, just to give them some cash for the property. But that doesn't include what could be the biggest cost of the program, which is staffing and administration. You have some smart folks who have actually crunched the numbers, and they think that when you actually add up all of the staffing and administration costs, it's going to bring this gun ban and buyback boondoggle up to the billions and billions of dollars. Now, I said I'm not a gun guy, Robin. I like to say that I'm from Alberta. My family's in Alberta. My heart's in Alberta. But really, I'm just some dorky guy with circle glasses living in downtown Ottawa. Man, I don't even know what I would do with a gun. But I have to ask you, for our listeners who do and who are worried about their guns or their property, what specifically, what are we talking here? What type of gun? So break it down for our listeners and keep it simple for guys like me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get you out here to Saskatchewan, Franco, for some hunting before the feds try to ban it altogether. Those numbers you're talking about from the PBO, that's 756 million for the guns plus billions for administration. Again, that's just that buyback that was announced in 2020. So this is a whole new ballgame here. Wow. And what it means is let's start with that amendment. So the amendment itself is simple. I've got it here in front of me. Let me just read it real quick. The amendment from this Toronto member of parliament is, quote, a firearm that is a rifle or shotgun that is capable of discharging centerfire ammunition in a semi-automatic manner and that is designed to accept a detachable cartridge magazine with a capacity greater than 5 cartridges of the type for which the firearm was originally designed. So that's it. But what that amendment means is that all of those firearms would become prohibited. They're currently restricted or non-restricted for hunters, for on-farm, as I mentioned. Prohibited is what the federal government wants. So they're going to prohibit hundreds, actually thousands of more models of rifles and shotguns, taking them from law-abiding Canadians, including more than 1 million legally licensed Canadian farmers, hunters, and sport shooters. So this amendment, it comes after, like I said, the witness testimony has already been heard. It's last minute. It's 11th hour stuff here. And remember the Bill C-21, the handgun freeze. This was about banning handguns and keeping streets safe from gang crime and violence. There was no mention of long guns like hunting rifles that are now in this amendment. You can go back to Prime Minister Trudeau himself said, I've got the quote here as well. Trudeau said, quote, we're not targeting law-abiding citizens who own guns to go hunting and for sport shooting. That was in February 2021. So that's completely out the window now with this government amendment, banning guns like some of these hunting rifles. They're just not the firearms used by gangs in the criminal activity that they're talking about. And further to that point, on the original ban and buyback scheme you're talking about, Franco, the National Police Federation, that's the union that represents RCMP officers in Canada, they stated that the federal gun ban and buyback will, and I have this quote as well, quote, do very little to address their goal to increase public safety, diverts extremely important personnel, resources, and funding away from addressing the more immediate and growing threat of criminal use of illegal firearms. Even at this committee just last week, there's a member of parliament on the committee who was a police officer for 35 years before becoming an MP. And he said just last week, quote, this is not an amendment that will do anything for public safety. So the feds want to expand the ban and buyback like this will just be massive cost to taxpayers while not making the streets any safer at all, which, several provinces have now echoed as well.
I'm glad you brought up the provinces because we know that there were some provinces who were fighting, I don't know, let's call it the first gun ban and buyback program. But what's happening now with this new 11th hour amendment? Are some of the provinces still fighting it? What are they saying?
Yeah, big time. No, that's a great question, Franco. Several provinces have come out to oppose this expanded gun ban, as they did the first, as you mentioned. So Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. The three prairie provinces actually got together, put out a joint statement just a few days ago saying this punishes law-abiding Canadians. It's not going to do anything to go after real criminals and deter gang violence. It does nothing to focus on the illegal guns and smuggling, bringing guns in from out of the country. And in fact, some federal politicians were not truthful when they said that they'd never go after farmers, hunters, and target shooters, which now they're quite obviously going to do. So this amendment is far in excess of how Bill C-21 was pitched, targeting the sale of Canadian handguns. There was never any mention of long guns. And actually Premier Scott Moe here in Saskatchewan, their government made a motion in the Ledge to look at all options available to protect the legal rights of gun owners in the province. The Premier here said this would overnight affect up to 75% of all firearms in the province could be at risk of becoming illegal. And again, the amendments don't target illegal firearms. And it shows just, a further disconnect between the feds and the reality of legal firearms owners in Saskatchewan and, for that matter, right across Canada.
So what happens next?
Well, as I mentioned, there's still an awful lot of questions on what this ban would mean, including if and when it would be part of this buyback scheme. They're debating the amendment right now and the entire bill at Public Safety Committee in Ottawa, with officials there trying to understand and explain what's happening in the amendment and the bill from public safety, the Department of Justice, the firearms program. Lots of unanswered questions right now on the intention of the bill and what is the cost going to be to taxpayers. So, it's in committee now, which after it's done at committee, it'll go back to the House for a vote, and then, of course, on to the Senate if it passes there. So if you're a law-abiding firearms owner in Canada, if you're a hunter, a farmer, a sports shooter, and just as a taxpayer in Canada, now is the time to speak up on this. Get in touch with your own MP, these MPs on Public Safety Committee, this Toronto MP, whose amendment it is, the ministers responsible for those departments as well. They need to hear from you, these politicians in Ottawa, as law-abiding Canadian firearms owners directly affected, and as all Canadian taxpayers who are going to wear this to the tune of billions of dollars to no effect on crime in Canada.
Well, Robin, man, thanks for just keeping an eye on here. I know some of this can be about as clear as mud, but you're doing a good job holding these guys accountable. But hey, let me just echo something that Robin mentioned. Even if you're a taxpayer, I don't have a gun. I'm just one of those taxpayers. But this is a taxpayer boondoggle in the making. It is extremely expensive. It's going to be extremely expensive, and it's not going to do anything to make Canada safer. We've even heard from the Mounties Union that this could make Canada less safe by diverting resources away from the true issues. So people, speak up, contact your member of parliament, contact these members of parliament on the committee.